Somewhere along the coast of Grover County, there is a stretch of land that everyone stopped believing in years ago. 18 acres, salt-leached, pale as old concrete, a farmhouse at the edge of it, dark except for one kitchen window, and inside that window a young woman. Wool socks, her dead father's robe, a cup of coffee she hasn't touched in 20 minutes. She's watching something outside. A truck, moving slowly down Route 9 with its headlights off. Just parking lights, two low amber eyes in the dark. Not passing through. Measuring. She doesn't know yet what's hidden in her father's barn. Doesn't know about the debt he carried alone for 4 years. Doesn't know what a mountain of discarded shells behind a fish market is worth to the right hands. The truck reaches the far corner post, slows, idles. 3:14 in the morning. No wind, no dogs barking, no reason at all for Petra Vance to be standing at her kitchen window in wool socks, in her dead father's flannel robe holding a cup of coffee she'd stopped drinking 20 minutes ago. But she was, because there was a truck out there. Not parked, not stopped, moving, slowly, down the long gravel edge of Route 9 where it ran parallel to the eastern fence line of her property, headlights off, just parking lights. Two low amber eyes in the dark, moving at the pace of a man who is measuring something, not passing through. Measuring. Petra set down her coffee, watched. The truck reached the far corner post where the fence bent south and it slowed almost to nothing. Idled, then moved on. Disappeared into the dark past the tree line like it had never been there at all. She stood at the window for a long time after. Then she picked up her coffee. Cold. Drank it anyway. Because here is what she didn't know yet, standing there in the dark in her father's robe. In 14 months, the man who owned that truck would walk through her front door in a suit that cost more than her tractor. He would set a check on this exact kitchen table, the largest number Petra had ever seen written on a single piece of paper, and she would pick it up and slide it right back. But that's later. That's after everything. First, we have to go back to the day she buried her father. The funeral was on a Thursday, not a big one. Warren Vance had not been a man who collected people the way some men do. He'd been a man who fixed things, fences, rotary tillers, conversations that had gone sideways. He fixed them quietly and then moved on and didn't make a lot of noise about it. So when he died heart attack 6:40 in the morning, coffee still warm on the stove, the people who came to say goodbye were mostly the kind of people he'd fixed something for once. 43 people. Petra counted. She didn't mean to. She was just standing by the grave in her good boots, the ones that pinched on the left side, and her brain needed something to do, something small and manageable. 43. She'd been back in Grover County for 8 months by then. She'd left her second year at Harmon Agricultural College when Warren had his first episode, a small stroke they called it. Minor, which is a word that makes it sound like a fender bender instead of what it actually was, which was a man standing in his own kitchen not recognizing his own daughter for approximately 45 seconds. 45 seconds. After that, Petra came home. She hadn't finished her degree. Hadn't finished much of anything if she was being honest with herself. She'd come home and learn to drive the tractor and do the soil amendments and read the weather. And she'd stood beside Warren every day in these fields for 8 months, learning, watching. And then a Tuesday morning in late March, she woke up and her father was on the kitchen floor, coffee still warm. She'd always thought that detail would stay with her more than it did, the coffee. But what actually stayed with her, the thing that lodged somewhere low in her chest and didn't move, was the way the kitchen felt after. The exact same as always. Same yellow curtains, same chipped mug on the counter, same scratch on the linoleum by the back door from when Warren had dragged in a deer he was too proud to leave for the coyotes. Same everything. Except Aunt Beva arrived 2 days after the funeral with a casserole dish wrapped in a dish towel in a single duffel bag, and she did not ask Petra anything. She just put the casserole in the refrigerator and the duffel bag in the second bedroom and started doing dishes. That was it. That was the whole conversation. And honestly, Petra loved her for it, because if one more person had said he's in a better place to her face, she was going to need to go sit in the barn and scream into a feed sack for approximately 10 minutes. The neighbors came. Of course they came. They came with food, and they came with condolences, and they came gently, kindly, with the best of intentions, with suggestions. It's too much land for one girl alone, Petra. The soil's been going downhill for years. Everybody knows. You could get a fair price. Get yourself set up somewhere. Nobody would think any less of you. They meant well, every single one of them. And they weren't wrong exactly. The land had been struggling. 3 seasons of heavy coastal rain had leached the minerals out of the topsoil until the earth was pale and thin, the color of old concrete crumbling into dry powder at the edges and clumping into wet clay in the middle. The local farmers called it tired ground, a polite way of saying it had given everything and gotten nothing back. 18 acres of tired ground, and a tractor that started on the third try if the weather was kind. And Petra, she listened to every neighbor, nodded, thanked them for their concern, and then she walked her fields alone in the early morning, the way she used to walk them with Warren, and she decided something that surprised even her. She wasn't selling. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have capital. She barely had a working knowledge of soil chemistry, and she'd only stayed awake in Dr. Kielman's crop rotation lectures about 60% of the time. She had 2 good arms and one stubborn habit of not doing what people told her to do when they told her it's not going to work. So she stayed. Roland Ash appeared on a Wednesday. Not a neighbor, not someone with a casserole. He arrived in a silver truck, clean late model, the kind of truck that had never hauled anything heavier than a golf bag. And he parked it neat at the end of her drive, and he walked up to her door like he'd been here 100 times. He hadn't. She'd never seen him before in her life. Ms. Vance. He extended a hand. Good handshake, firm, practiced. My name is Roland Ash. I represent Crestline Agricultural Development. I wanted to first say how sorry I am for your loss. Petra looked at him. Your father was well regarded in the county, Roland said. He was. I'll be direct with you if that's all right. Crestline has had its eye on this stretch of property for some time. The acreage, the coastal positioning, the access road. We think there's significant potential here for the right kind of development. Development. Agricultural expansion. Consolidation. We'd offer you a fair market price. More than fair, actually. He reached into his jacket, not hurried. Nothing pushy about it, and set a business card on her porch railing. Thick cardstock, raised lettering. The kind of card that announces its own importance before you've read a word on it. You've just lost your father, Roland said. I'm not here to pressure you. Think about it. Take your time. I'll come back. And he left. Just like that, neat and quiet, back into his clean truck, back down the drive. Petra looked at this business card, picked it up, turned it over, blank on the back. She brought it inside and set it on the kitchen table and told herself she'd throw it away later. She didn't throw it away. The lawyer's office was small and smelled like old paper, and the kind of carpet cleaner that is always slightly worse than the smell it's trying to fix. His name was Deaver. He'd handled the Vance estate for 12 years. He had a kind face and the expression of a man who has delivered bad news so many times that he's developed a professional gentleness around it, like calluses. Petra sat across from him on a Wednesday morning 2 weeks after the funeral with Aunt Beva beside her and her hands folded in her lap. She thought she was there to hear about the land. She was right. She just didn't know what she was about to hear about the land. Deaver laid out the will first, straightforward enough. Everything to Petra. The house, the equipment, the truck, the 18 acres. All of it. Exactly as expected. Exactly as Warren had always said. Then Deaver set a second folder on the desk. Thinner. Newer looking. There is one additional matter, he said. And that was when Petra's stomach did the thing. That slow drop, like the bottom floor of a building turning out not to be there. Your father took out a lien against the property, Deaver said approximately 4 years ago, against the full equity of the land and house. The balance remaining is $74,200. Silence. Aunt Beva said, I'm sorry, what? Petra didn't say anything. She was listening. That was it. Just listening. He was current on every payment, Deaver said quickly, because he was a kind man, and he could see what was happening on her face. Never missed one, never late. The bank has extended considerable goodwill because of that payment history. They're prepared to give you 14 months before they consider collection proceedings. 14 months. Yes. To come up with $74,000, or a portion thereof sufficient to demonstrate why? Not a question. Or it was, but not the kind that needs a question mark. Why did he take the lien? Deaver opened the folder. The lien was taken in April 4 years ago. I believe you know that your mother, Vera Vance, was diagnosed with. I know what she was diagnosed with. The treatment costs were significant. Your father did not want to burden you with. I know. Petra said it softly. I know. She looked at her hands. 18 months of Vera in and out of hospitals. 18 months of treatments and specialists and drives to the coast and back. And Warren never saying a word about money, not once, not to Petra, not to anyone. Just paying, just keeping it going, the way he kept everything going. Quietly, without making a noise about it. He hadn't told her. Because of course he hadn't told her. That's who he was. That was exactly, completely, totally who he was. And now he was gone. And she had 14 months and $74,000 and 18 acres of tired ground. Petra stood up, picked up her jacket, thanked Deaver, walked out into the parking lot and stood in the cold air and breathed. Aunt Beva came out behind her, said nothing, just stood. After a minute, Petra said, I need to check the east field. Beva said, okay. Something might be draining wrong. I'll make dinner. That was the whole conversation. She did not check the east field. She got in her truck and she drove. Nowhere particular. Down Route 9 toward the coast, past the lumberyard, past the old feed cooperative that had closed 2 winters back, past the Methodist church where they'd held Warren service, out to where the road curved toward the water and you could smell the salt and the cold and the absolute indifference of the ocean. She pulled off at the gravel turnaround by the old boat launch and she sat there for 40 minutes watching the water. 74,000. 14 months. She did the math she didn't want to do. Even if she planted every acre this season, even if she maxed every field with the highest yield crop she could manage on soil this depleted, she'd be lucky to clear 8,000. Maybe 10 if the summer was kind. Not 74, not even close. She could sell equipment, the old bush hog, the hay rake, the extra discs, maybe 5,000 total, still not close. She could take a job in town, come back to farm on evenings and weekends. She'd be exhausted in 6 weeks, and the fields would show it. Roland Ash's business card was in her jacket pocket. She transferred it there without thinking about it when she'd grabbed the jacket. She pulled it out now, held it in the light. Crestline Agricultural Development. More than fair, actually. She put it back in her pocket. She drove home. The barn was cold that evening. Petra had started doing this in the weeks since the funeral, coming out here after dinner, after Beva turned in, just to be in the space where Warren had spent so much of his time. It didn't feel like grief exactly. It felt more like listening for something. Like if she was quiet enough in here long enough, she'd eventually hear whatever it was he hadn't gotten around to saying. She was looking for the insurance documents. That's what she told herself. Practical, productive. The barn was organized the way Warren organized everything, which was to say it made perfect sense to Warren and to no one else on earth. Labeled boxes that contained entirely different things than what the label said. Shelves organized by some logic that was probably chronological but didn't look it. 3 separate coffee cans of bolts, none of which were sorted by size or type. She worked through the shelves along the east wall. Feed catalogs from 5 years ago. A tackle box that held seed packets instead of lures. A coffee can of receipts from 2019. She found it behind the 3rd shelf, all the way back. A tin box, the flat rectangular kind that holds Christmas cookies, but dented and worn with no label on it at all. She almost put it back. It didn't look like insurance documents, but she opened it. Inside, rubber-banded papers, a pocket knife, a photograph faded of a man she didn't know standing by a truck. And a notebook, the old-fashioned kind, bound in brown leather, the cover soft from years of handling, the edges of the pages darkened by fingers. No title on the cover, no name. She took it to the workbench, sat on the old stool under the single hanging bulb, opened it. The first page stopped her. Not a name, not a date. Just one line written in ink so old it had gone from black to a deep brown blue. The handwriting, careful, deliberate, like someone who had thought about each letter before making it. Tired ground isn't dead ground. It's just ground that hasn't met the right hands yet. Below it a name, E.J. Vance, and a year, 1967, Ellis Vance, her grandfather. Petra had been 3 years old when Ellis died. She had exactly one memory of him, a large man who smelled like cedar and motor oil, lifting her up so she could see into a horse's ear. For some reason, she had never been able to explain the two of them laughing. That was it. One moment, and then nothing, and then a grave in the Lutheran cemetery on the edge of town she'd visited maybe 4 times. She turned the page. What followed was not what she expected. She'd expected a journal, a diary, something personal. It was a research notebook. Ellis Vance had been before he farmed a commercial fisherman. He'd worked the boats out of Harlow's Point for 7 years before he married and moved inland to his wife's family land. And in the late 1960s, in a notebook he'd apparently kept very quietly, he had written down a theory, slowly, over what looked like several years given the shifts in ink color and the way the handwriting changed slightly as the entries aged. The theory was this: the shells. When he'd fished, he'd seen what happened to the shell waste from the processing houses. Mountains of it hauled to landfill every season, every year. Oyster shells, clam shells, mussel shells. And Ellis, who was farming by then, who was watching his fields turn pale and thin from the same leaching rains that Grover County always got, had started to wonder. The shells were calcium carbonate, primarily, among other minerals. And calcium carbonate was, he'd read enough to know this. Though he wasn't a scientist, wasn't trained in any of this, was exactly what tired coastal soil was missing. It was the thing that corrected the acid balance, the thing that let other minerals work, the thing that blended right in the right proportions, could bring soil back, could actually bring it back. Page after page of his notes, crude calculations, sketches of soil layers, handwritten citations of agricultural bulletins he'd apparently driven to the county library to read. And then about two-thirds of the way through the notebook, the handwriting changed. Warren's handwriting. Same notebook, different pen, different ink, picking up exactly where Ellis had left off, but 30 years later, the language more technical. Now the calculations more precise. Warren clearly drawing on the extension bulletins and university soil papers that had been published in the decades between. And Warren's section ended, she could see where it ended, because there was a clear stop, a longer gap between entries, and then a final section that was different from everything else. A letter, to her. It began Petra. That was all. Just her name. Like he'd sat down knowing exactly what he needed to say, and couldn't quite get past the first word for a moment. Then, if you're reading this, then I ran out of time to say it out loud, which is the thing I was most afraid of. I should have told you about the money. I should have told you a lot of things. Your mother never wanted you to know how bad it got. Neither did I. We wanted you to have one thing that wasn't that bad. And you were it. You were the one thing. The soil research was your grandfather's idea. I only picked it up because of your grandmother's garden. She kept one corner of it alive, even in the worst years, and I always wondered why. Found out when I found the notebook. I've been picking at it for the last 6 years. I kept thinking I'd tell you when it was ready, when I had something finished to show you. I never got it finished. The answer is at the coast. Look for what nobody wants. You'll know it when you smell it. There's a professor named Farley Edmond. Farley, his name is in the notes. Find him. He'll understand what you're looking at. I'm sorry for the hard part. You're stronger than I got to tell you. Dad Petra sat for a long time. The barn was very cold. She could see her breath. She read the letter twice more. Then she closed the notebook carefully, set it on her knee. looked at the far wall of the barn where the old tools hung on their hooks in the particular arrangement Warren had used for 40 years. The answer is at the coast. She stood up, took the notebook, went inside, put on her boots, put on her jacket, and picked up her truck keys. Aunt Beva appeared in the hallway. "Where are you going?" "It's almost 3 in the morning. I need to drive." "Petra." "I'll be back." She kissed Beva on the cheek. "Don't wait up." Route 9 at 3 a.m., nobody out, just her headlights and the broken white line, and the smell coming in through the cracked window of salt water getting closer. The stars were clear and very cold. The truck cab smelled like worn motor oil and the particular cedar of the trees along the east fence. She'd stopped noticing that smell weeks ago, and now it was back. She drove. Past the lumberyard, past the church, past the dark storefronts of town, down toward the coast. Harlow's Point Fish Market was the only building still lit. She'd driven past it 1,000 times, her whole life. You drove past it and you smelled it, a layered smell complex and strong brine and cold water, and something organic and alive under it. And then it faded as you passed, and you thought nothing of it. That's what you did. That's what everyone did. Except tonight, she slowed down. Because there were workers outside, even at this hour. Forklifts moving. The concrete dock lit by high industrial lights that made everything look slightly overexposed. And in the center of all of it, men with wheelbarrows, moving steadily, deliberately from the processing building to a row of large industrial containers along the west wall of the lot, shells. Mountains of them. Oyster shells, clam shells, broken mussel shells, glinting pale and iridescent under the dock lights, piled into the containers with a sound like rain. And then the containers, already full of worker, directing the wheelbarrows to a flatbed truck backed up to the edge of the lot. More shells there. A pile as high as a man's chest. All of it going somewhere. Petra pulled into the lot. She didn't really plan to. Her hands just did it. Truck in park, door open, feet on pavement. She walked up to the dock in her barn jacket and the boots that pinched on the left side, and she looked like exactly what she was, a 22-year-old who had been awake too long and driven too far, and was making a decision that had started forming in a cold barn 40 minutes ago. A man near the flatbed truck looked up. Mid-30s, heavy-set, work gloves. He had the expression of someone who manages practical things and has no patience for impractical people. "Market's closed." "I know. Where is that going?" She nodded toward the containers. "Landfill." He went back to directing the wheelbarrow. "How often?" "Twice a week." "How much does that cost you?" He stopped, looked at her properly now. "Why, because I want to know." The man set down his clipboard. "Who are you?" "Petra Vance. My father's farm is 12 miles up Route 9. "Who are you?" "Felix Drummond. I manage this facility." He said it like a man who has the authority to end this conversation whenever he wants to. But he hadn't ended it yet. "The disposal runs us about 600 a week, more if the county raises the landfill rates, which they're talking about doing." He paused. "Why are you asking?" Petra looked at the containers, at the shells, pale and wet in the dock lights. All that calcium, all that mineral, all that she was already thinking in Warren's words, in Ellis's words, already matching the shapes of what she was seeing to the shapes of the notebook, all that going into a hole in the ground. "I'll take it," she said. Felix blinked. "All of it. As often as you can spare it. I'll haul it myself. It won't cost you a thing." A very long moment. Felix looked at her, then at the shells, then at her again in her barn jacket, standing in a commercial fish processing lot at 3 in the morning with brine slowly soaking into the canvas of her jacket collar. "For what?" "Soil amendment. These are clamshells." "I know what they are." Another pause. Felix had the look now of a man who has learned through long experience to recognize a person who has made up their mind, even when the mind they've made up seems strange. He picked up his clipboard. You'll need to sign a liability waiver. The shells come with processing residue. There's an odor. I know. It's significant. I know. You sure you... Do you have the waiver here, or do I need to come back? Felix looked at her for one more second. Then he almost smiled. Just the very beginning of one quickly dismissed. I've got it in the office. She signed it in a room that smelled like brine and bleach, and industrial soap standing at a counter because there were no chairs, the fluorescent light buzzing slightly overhead. Felix stamped it, made a copy, handed her the original. You can start Thursday, he said. Come around back. Thank you. You're insane, he said, not unkindly, as an observation. Probably. She folded the waiver, put it in her jacket pocket right next to Roland Ash's business card. Good night, Mr. Drummond. She drove home in the full dark with the windows down and the cold salt air coming in, and she was thinking so fast she couldn't track all of it. She was thinking about the notebook, about Ellis writing that first line in 1967, about Warren picking it up 30 years later, about the letter. The answer is at the coast. Look for what nobody wants. She'd looked. She'd found it. Now here is what she didn't know yet. Here is what she was about to spend the next several months learning with great personal difficulty and not a little humiliation. Knowing where the answer is and having the answer are two completely different things. But she was 22 years old, and her father had spent 6 years not finishing the thing, and her grandfather had spent years before that. And there were 14 months on the clock and $74,000 between her and the end of everything. So, she drove. The sun came up just as she turned off Route 9 onto her own gravel drive. Pale pink light across the frost on the fields. The house dark except for the kitchen window where Aunt Beva had left the light on. The east field gray and quiet in the early morning. The soil looking exactly as it had every morning, pale compacted, the color of something that's given up. Petra stopped the truck, got out, walked to the edge of the field and stood there in the cold, the notebook under one arm, the waiver folded in her pocket. She looked at the field. 18 acres of tired ground, not dead ground. She opened the notebook to the first page, tilted it toward the pale morning light to see the ink clearly. Then she turned past her grandfather's pages, past her father's calculations, to the clean blank pages at the back. She didn't have a pen. She went and got one from the truck, came back, stood there at the edge of the field, wrote one thing in the top right corner of the first blank page, just to mark it, just to say she'd started. The date, and below it what I know so far. She looked at that, looked at the field. So far was doing a lot of work in that sentence. She knew the theory, she knew the raw material, she knew there was a man named Edmund Farley she needed to find. She knew the math was bad, and the clock was running, and 14 months felt like nothing, and nothing felt like enough. She also knew she was still here. Her father wasn't, her mother wasn't, but she was, standing on this land, in his robe that she was still wearing, with this notebook. The sun came a little higher. The frost on the field began to release tiny threads of steam rising from the pale soil. The barn swallows were awake now, arguing in the eaves of the old barn. A woodpecker had started up somewhere along the fence line, methodical and unhurried. Petra closed the notebook, put it in her jacket. She had to be at Harlow's Point by Thursday. She went inside to make coffee. Thursday came. Petra was at Harlow's Point before the sun was fully up, backed her truck to the dock like Felix had told her, and waited while 2 workers loaded the bed with shell waste from the overnight processing run. Oyster shells mostly, some clam, broken into irregular pieces, wet, layered with the residue of whatever had lived in them before. The smell hit her immediately. Like the ocean, but wrong. Like the ocean had been left out too long. Salt and brine and something deeper underneath something organic, and turning the particular smell of biological material in the early stages of becoming something else. She drove home with the windows up. That was her first mistake. The windows up meant the smell concentrated in the cab, And by the time she hit Route 9, she was driving with her face turned slightly toward the cracked window, like a dog breathing in sharp, controlled increments. But she got home, unloaded the truck into the test plot by hand. Half an acre on the south side of the east field, the worst patch, the place where nothing had grown right in 3 seasons. She spread the shells in a rough layer, maybe 4 inches deep, broke up the bigger pieces with a mallet. It took 4 hours. She was back at Harlow's Point the next Thursday, and the Thursday after that. And the smell got worse before it got better, which was a thing she probably should have known from the notebook had she been reading more carefully, had she not been operating on 5 hours of sleep most nights, and burning through Warren's field charts, trying to understand what the ratio of shell to soil should actually be. The organic residue on the shells, bits of tissue, membrane, the material left behind from the processing, that material drying in the sun, releasing into the air, produced a smell that was not subtle. Not subtle at all. Bart Welby showed up on a Tuesday. He didn't knock. He just appeared at the edge of her field with his arms crossed and his jaw set and the look of a man who has been patient for exactly as long as he intends to be. Petra. She was on her knees turning shell fragments into the topsoil. She looked up. Bart, I've been smelling this for 11 days. I know. My wife can't eat breakfast on the east side of the house. I'm sorry about that. What in God's name are you doing? She stood up, pulled off one work glove, gestured at the field. Soil amendment. Calcium carbonate in the shell material corrects the acid balance, improves mineral structure, should help bring the soil back. Bart looked at the shell fragments, at the pale soil, at her. That's insane, he said. Probably. You can't just put fish garbage in your field. It's not fish garbage. It's calcium and trace minerals, and it smells like fish garbage. Fair. It really did smell like fish garbage. There was no winning that argument. Petra put her glove back on. I'll have it under control in 2 weeks, she said. I'm calling the county office. He left. She watched him go. Then she went back to her knees and kept turning. Lorna Hewitt arrived on a Friday morning. County vehicle, clipboard, professional composure, and the kind of flat effect that said she had seen a lot of questionable farming decisions in Grover County and was not easily shocked. She was 48 years old, and she walked the perimeter of Petra's test plot with the gait of someone measuring several things at once. Petra followed her, not talking, just following. Lorna crouched at the edge of the shell layer, picked up a fragment, turned it over, set it down, stood. You've got a complaint filed, she said. Volatile organic compound levels. Your neighbor. I know. Oh. I need to test the air quality. If the VOC levels are over threshold, I'll need to issue a stop work order. She said it without cruelty, without apology either. Just fact. Petra kept her face neutral. Stop work order. Stop work order while the clock is running and the bank is counting, and Roland Ash's card is still on her kitchen table. Perfect. Great. Wonderful. How long would the stop work order last? She asked. Depends on remediation. Could be 30 days. Could be longer if you can't demonstrate reduction. Silence. A crow landed on the fence post at the field's edge, looked at them, left. Do you know anything about calcium carbonate in soil? Petra said. Lorna looked at her. Some, because my grandfather started this research in 1967, and my father picked it up 6 years ago, and there's a ratio problem I can't get right. And if there's someone who actually understands what I'm looking at, I'd rather talk to that person than... She stopped, started over. I'm not trying to make a nuisance. I'm trying to fix this land. But I need to know if there's someone in the county system who actually knows soil chemistry. Lorna held her clipboard to her chest. There's a man named Edmund Farley, she said after a pause. Retired professor. He did soil surveys for the county for about 10 years before he stopped. He lives in Mill Haven. She reached into her clipboard folder and wrote down an address on the back of an inspection form. I can't promise he'll help you. He's particular. Petra took the address. Thank you. I still have to test the air quality, Lorna said. I know. And I need you to have a remediation plan in 30 days. I'll have one in 2 weeks. Lorna looked at her for a moment. Something shifted very slightly in her professional expression. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. The look of someone noticing that the person across from them is not what they expected to find. She wrote something in her clipboard, clicked her pen. Thursday next week, she said. I'll come back and take the baseline reading. She left. Petra looked at the address. Millhaven was 40 minutes south. She went inside, told Beva she'd be back for dinner, and got in the truck. Edmund Farley's house sat at the end of a gravel drive behind a windbreak of cedar that blocked most of the road noise and all of the view from the highway. The house itself was modest. White clapboard green shutters, a woodpile stacked under the overhang with the kind of geometric precision that suggests a person with opinions about how things should be done. Petra knocked, nothing for about 30 seconds. Then footsteps. The door opened. A man in his early 70s, gray hair, cut short, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. The general physical presence of someone who used to work outdoors and still holds the shape of it. He looked at her. Dr. Farley, who's asking? Petra Vance, my father's farm is on Route 9, 12 miles north of... I know where Route 9 is. I found his research notes. He had your name in them. He cited a paper you co-authored in 2004 on calcium amendment in low pH coastal soils. She said it fast because he had the expression of a man who closes doors on people he doesn't immediately want to talk to. I'm trying to finish what he started, and I have a significant odor problem that I think is a ratio error in the oven dry phase, and I can't figure out what I'm missing. Farley looked at her, looked at the notebook she was holding. Where did you drive from? Route 9, 40 minutes. You drove 40 minutes without calling first. I don't have your number. You could have called the county extension office. I did. They gave me the address. Silence. Farley stepped back from the door, which was not quite an invitation but was not a refusal either. Show me the notebook, he said. They stood at his kitchen counter. No chairs offered. No coffee offered. Just the overhead light and the notebook open between them. Farley read. He read slowly in the way of someone for whom reading is a tool, not a leisure activity. He turned pages. He went back. He held one page closer to the light. Petra stood across the counter and did not say anything. Don't rush him. Don't push. Don't start explaining things because you're nervous. Just wait. She waited. After maybe 10 minutes, he pointed at a page. Warren's handwriting. The section on processing procedure. This step, he said. Here, the direct application phase. Your father skipped the prior anaerobic stage. The 72-hour cover period. You know about it. I knew there was a step missing. I couldn't identify which one. It's in your grandfather's notes. He turned the pages back to the front. Ellis's section. He found it. A line in small faded writing at the bottom of a page, the kind of footnote that gets written when you're running out of space and in a hurry. Here, he knew. Your grandfather noted it and your father missed it because the ink is nearly gone. He looked up. Fix that step and you'll eliminate 70 to 80% of your odor problem. Petra stared at the line. Right there, the whole time. The ratio for the mineral supplement blend, she said. Page 34. He left a variable uncalculated. I see that. Do you know what it should be? Farley looked at the page for a long moment. Come back on Monday, he said. Bring a soil sample from your test plot. That was it. She closed the notebook. Monday, she said, before noon. She drove 40 minutes home, and she almost smiled. Almost. She fixed the procedure. The 72-hour sealed cover phase before surface application. The shells stayed covered, stayed wet. The anaerobic environment broke down the residual tissue faster and cleaner, reducing the volatile compound release when the material finally met the air. The smell went from catastrophic to manageable in 11 days. Not gone, but manageable. The difference between something you cannot ignore and something you can live with if you choose to. Lorna Hewitt came back Thursday, tested the air, stood in the field with her equipment for 20 minutes while Petra worked nearby, and tried to look like she was not actively calculating how her entire plan collapsed if the numbers were wrong. The numbers were not wrong. Lorna packed up her equipment, made a note on her clipboard, looked at Petra. "You changed the procedure." "I did. 34% reduction in 7 days." She said it like she was reading from the clipboard, which she was. "That's faster than I expected." "I had help." Lorna wrote something down, did not close the clipboard. "There's a sampling happening at the county AG office," she said, not looking up, her voice going slightly professional, casual in the way people's voices do when they're about to say something useful and don't want it to seem like they're offering a favor. "Different soil amendments, local producers. I don't know if you'd have anything ready, but if you had even a sample, when?" 6 weeks. Petra did the math. Fast. 6 weeks was tight, but possibly not impossible. "I'll have something," she said. Lorna clicked her pen, looked up. "I'll put your name on the list." But here is the thing about plans. Plans are made in good weather. The rain that came in the third week of May was not weather. It was an argument. 4 days continuous, the kind of coastal storm that arrives without apology and reconfigures the landscape before it leaves. Petra had spent 2 weeks building her test pile to a proper depth. Shells properly aged compost layers, correctly proportioned the exact ratios Dr. Farley had worked out with her at his kitchen counter on a yellow legal pad over 2 Monday visits. 2 weeks of work, 1 night of rain. She stood in the field the morning after in her rubber boots, the mud pulling at every step, and looked at what was left. The pile had moved. Not dramatically, not catastrophically, just shifted. The careful layers she'd built were blurred together. The material she'd meant to stay at the higher slope had run with the water down toward the lower section of the field. Spread thin diluted the proportions she'd worked out now somewhere between wrong and completely impossible to calculate. She stood there. The sky was still overcast, the kind of pale gray that doesn't commit to clearing or continuing. She did not cry. She made a note of that internally, like a small, cold score on a tally sheet. She did not cry. She just stood in the mud and looked at a month of work that had moved itself 12 feet south overnight and thought, okay. So we start again. She started again. The tractor died on a Tuesday. Not a gradual decline. Not the polite warning of increasing difficulty that gives you time to plan. Just running and then not running. A sound she'd never heard it make before, metal on metal, something wrong and final, and then silence. She sat in the seat for a moment, tried the ignition. Nothing. Got out, opened the hood, looked at the engine the way people look at engines when they don't know what they're looking at, which is to say, comprehensively and helplessly. Everything looked exactly like an engine, which told her nothing. The mechanic in town said the issue was terminal in the practical sense, which was not the medical sense but had basically the same meaning. Repairable. But the repair would cost $2,400. And Petra did not have $2,400. She had $920 in a credit card she'd been afraid to use. So, the tractor sat in the barn, and Petra did what could be done by hand, which was considerably slower and considerably more exhausting than what could be done by tractor, and she adjusted the schedule accordingly. She woke up earlier, she went to bed later. Her hands developed calluses in new places. The skin around her knuckles cracked in the cold mornings, and she taped them with athletic tape from the first aid kit and kept going. Beva noticed. Beva didn't say anything about it. That was her particular form of love. She noticed, and she put better lotion on the bathroom counter, and she made dinners that were slightly larger than usual, and she didn't ask questions Petra didn't want to answer, which was all of the questions, just for right now. The morning after the tractor broke, Petra walked out her front door and found 2 50-pound bags of agricultural compost at the foot of the porch steps. No note, no name. She looked around. The drive was empty. The road was quiet. She picked up one of the bags, Premium coastal compost, the specific blend Dr. Farley had mentioned needing once offhand in a way that suggested it wasn't cheap and wasn't easy to find in Grover County. She walked to Bart Welby's fence line. Bart was in his yard, back toward her, doing something with a post driver that looked unnecessary for the hour of the morning. Bart! He kept working. Bart! Louder. He stopped, did not turn around. I don't know what you're talking about. There are 2 bags of compost on my porch. Probably a mistake. There's no other farm in a quarter-mile that would need this blend. Silence. Bart set down the post driver. Very slowly turned around. He had the look of a man who has been cornered by a situation he created and resents being cornered by it. Your father fixed my hay baler in 2011, he said. Spent 2 full days on it. Wouldn't take a cent for it. Said neighbors don't charge neighbors. He said it in the flat tone of a man reciting a fact he has made his peace with, but still thinks about sometimes. I always figured I'd pay that back somehow. I never figured out how. Petra looked at him. Thank you, she said. Don't. He picked up the post driver. And for the record, the smell is better. I know. It's still not good. I know Bart. He went back to the post. She was halfway back to her own porch when she heard him. Petra. She stopped. Hold on. He set the post driver down again, went inside his house, came back with a manila envelope slightly bent at one corner like it had been sitting in a drawer for a while. He held it out over the fence. She took it. Warren gave me a folder of papers about 3 years back. Said he wanted them somewhere dry while he was reorganizing the barn. Said he'd come get them when he was ready. Bart's jaw worked slightly. He never came to get them. She opened the flap. Inside 11 sheets of paper, Warren's handwriting, calculations mostly, ratios, numbers, and one page that was different, a full page of notes on the mineral supplement blend, the variable that had been left blank on page 34 of the notebook. He'd calculated it. He just calculated it separately, apparently, on the day he gave the papers to Bart for safekeeping. Because of course he had. Because Warren Vance organized things in ways that made perfect sense to Warren Vance. He worked this out, she said. I don't know what that is, Bart said. I never read it. She looked up at him. He was looking at the fence post he just placed, checking its level with the practiced eye of someone who has been doing this for 40 years. Thank you, she said again. Bart waved a hand, went back to work. She brought the new ratios to Dr. Farley on a Monday. He read them, compared them to his own calculations, sat very still for a moment, then made 2 small marks on his yellow legal pad and slid it across the counter to her. He was close, Farley said. He had the calcium to magnesium ratio right. He was off on the potassium supplement by about 12%. He tapped his marks. This is the correction. Petra copied it into the notebook. How did he know to start with the ratio he had? Farley asked. Not like a test, like genuine curiosity. His father, my grandfather, was a fisherman before he farmed. He'd watched shell material break down in the water for years. He understood how it released minerals. She looked at the notebook. He just didn't have the lab equipment to calculate it precisely. Farley was quiet for a moment. What was your grandfather's name? Ellis Vance. Farley said nothing, but something changed in his face very slightly. The small adjustment of someone recognizing something. There was a paper, he said, 1971, in the County Agricultural Extension Bulletin, about calcium amendment in coastal farmland. I read it in my first year of graduate school. He looked at the notebook. E.J. Vance. Petra stared at him. My grandfather published that. He did. Farley looked at her for a long moment. You're finishing 50 years of work. She sat with that for a second. 50 years. Then I'd better get it right, she said. The soil changed in late June. She almost missed it because she was looking for something dramatic. A clear line, a before and after. That's not what soil recovery looks like. It looks like nothing, and then nothing, and then nothing, and then one morning you push your boot into the ground, and it goes in differently than it did yesterday. That's it. That's the whole announcement. The ground stops resisting. She knelt down, turned the soil with her hands. Darker than it had been. Not uniformly, patches of it, but real. Real color, not pale gray, but actual brown, the brown of something that has biological activity in it. She dug in with both hands, went down maybe 6 inches, and there, a worm, then another. She sat back on her heels. She'd been doing this for 3 months, 112 days, give or take counting, from the first Thursday at Harlow's Point. The sleepless nights, the mallet, the cracked knuckles, the smell that had gotten her a formal county complaint and a visit from a clipboard-carrying inspector who had somehow become one of the only people in the county she trusted. And a worm. She laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a dignified laugh. The kind of laugh that comes up from somewhere low and surprised, the kind you make when something finally works and you've been too afraid to believe it might, and now you don't know what to do with your face. She laughed alone in the field for about 30 seconds. Then she got up and went to plant tomatoes. She sold the first bag on a Saturday. The county farmer's market. A folding table, a hand-lettered sign, 12 paper bags of the blended amendment she'd packaged the night before with Biba sitting across the kitchen table helping fold and seal. Most people walked past. A woman stopped, 70-something, steel gray hair, good posture, the kind of woman who moves through a farmer's market like she's been doing it for 60 years and has opinions about everything in it. She picked up a bag, read the label. Vance Soil, she said. That's Warren's place, isn't it? It was. It's mine now. I'm Petra. I know who you are. The woman set the bag down, then picked it up again, which meant she'd decided something. I'm Priscilla Ward. I live 2 crossroads down from your east field. I've been watching that plot of yours change all spring. She looked at Petra directly. What are you charging? Petra told her. I'll take 2 bags. And that was how Vance Soil's first customer came and went on a Saturday morning, carrying 2 paper bags, not saying much, which was fine, because Petra was too surprised to say anything coherent anyway. 3 weeks later, Priscilla Ward was back with her neighbor. Ned Falk came looking for work in July. He showed up the way that people in small counties show up when they need something. He'd heard from someone who'd heard from someone that Petra Vance was doing something with shells on the Route 9 farm and might be needing extra hands. He was 38. He'd worked at the Grover County lumber mill for 11 years before it closed. Good with machines, good with repetitive physical work. The kind of person who doesn't need instructions repeated twice. She hired him at an hourly rate that was less than he deserved and more than she could comfortably spare. He didn't complain. Darlene Pruitt came 2 weeks after Ned. She'd seen Petra at the farmer's market and done her own research before she showed up. 45 years old. Had managed distribution logistics for a regional food company before it went under, which meant she understood packaging and orders in the whole system between a product and a customer in a way that Petra, if she was being honest, absolutely did not. Petra hired her the same day. 3 people now. 3 people in a test plot that was working in a product that had 12 regular buyers and was just starting to develop the kind of word of mouth that moves through small counties the way water moves through good soil. Slow, reliable, eventually inevitable. She called Dr. Farley on a Monday evening to tell him about the soil recovery. He was quiet for a moment. And the earthworms, he said. Yes. Another pause. Good, he said. And that was that. But Petra had learned enough about Edmund Farley by now to understand that good from Edmund Farley was approximately the equivalent of a standing ovation from anyone else. She slept 8 hours that night for the first time in 3 months. The call from Callenbeck Farm came on a Wednesday. Petra was in the field turning a new batch when her phone rang. She stripped off one glove and answered it right there, standing in the middle of the test plot, with the smell of good amended soil all around her. Callenbeck Organics, 2 towns north, a 30-acre certified organic operation that supplied to regional grocery co-ops. The man who called her was their operations manager, a person named Garrett, who spoke fast and got to the point. They needed 5 tons by the 1st of August. Would she be able to supply? She did the math in her head. Fast, yes, barely. If she ran the operation flat out from now until then and pulled Ned and Darlene off their other tasks, yes. Yes, she said. They worked out a price, a real price, not farmer's market price. Wholesale. 5 tons at wholesale was she wrote the number down after she hung up the phone and looked at it for a moment. It was real money. It was not enough to cover the debt, but it was real money. More than she'd made in any single transaction in her life. She called Ned, called Darlene, told them. Ned said something practical about scaling the processing setup. Darlene started talking about delivery logistics. They were both already moving. That evening, Petra sat on the porch steps and let herself feel something she'd been careful not to feel too soon. Hope. Real specific, dangerous hope. 2 weeks later, Lorna Hewitt called. Not about air quality, not about the inspection. Her voice was different than usual, still professional, but with something under it. The careful tone of someone about to deliver information they know is going to hurt. I need to tell you something, Lorna said. I found it in the State Agricultural Registry. A company called Crestline Agricultural Development submitted a provisional patent application for a shell-based calcium amendment product 12 weeks ago. Petra went very still. 12 weeks ago, she said. Yes. 12 weeks ago, Petra had been picking up shells on Thursday mornings and losing sleep over odor complaints. She hadn't sold a single bag. She hadn't been in any registry, any publication, any record that would have told anyone she was doing this. How did they know? She said it mostly to herself. I don't know, Lorna said, but their filing date predates any public record of your production or sales. A pause. Petra, if they establish prior claim, your wholesale contracts. I know, Petra said. I'm going to look at your grandfather's 1971 publication, Lorna said, and the notebook. If the methodology can be dated to E.J. Vance before Crestline Agricultural even existed as a company. How long will that take? I need to make some calls. Give me 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The 1st of August was 6 weeks away. Callenbeck was 5 tons, and Crestline had filed before she'd sold her first bag. How? She drove to Harlow's Point on a Thursday evening after hours. Felix was in his office. She didn't call ahead. She just drove down and walked up to the dock and knocked on the office door, and he opened it and looked at her face and said nothing for a second. Come in, he said. His office was small. A single desk, a whiteboard with processing schedules, a coffee maker from approximately 2003. He sat behind the desk. She sat in the chair across from it. She put the name on the table. Crestline Agricultural, Wade Fenner, Regional Development. Do you know them? Something happened in Felix's face. Not guilt exactly. Something more complicated. The face of someone who has been having a private argument with himself about exactly this for longer than he'd like to admit. He didn't answer immediately. Felix. He looked at the desk, looked at her, looked at the desk again. A man came here, he said finally, about 13 weeks ago. Said he was an independent agricultural research consultant. He wanted to know about shell waste processing, how we handled it, what quantities, what the material composition was. He stopped. It seemed like a general inquiry, the kind we get occasionally from university programs. You told him about me. A long pause this time. He asked if any local operations had inquired about shell waste for agricultural use. Felix said it carefully, like a man choosing every word for the weight it carries. I said yes. I described what you were picking up and how often. He looked up. I didn't know what he was going to do with it. I didn't ask who he worked for. He stopped. I answered him the way I'd answer anyone. Did he leave a card? Felix opened his desk drawer slowly, pulled out a business card, slid it across. Crestline Agricultural Development. Wade Fenner, Regional Development. She looked at it, turned it over, blank on the back like Roland ashes. She set the card on the desk between them and waited. Felix had the look of a man who knows there is more to say and has been trying to find a way not to say it. There was an offer, he said, after the visit, from Crestline to provide regular updates on your operation. He said it to the desk, not to her. My daughter Mara is 8 years old. She has a kidney disease. We've been managing it for 3 years. She needs a surgical procedure. The insurance doesn't cover the full cost. I've been looking for any income I can find outside the regular wage. His jaw worked. I took one payment. I sent one update, and then I stopped. I couldn't keep going. He looked up finally. I know that doesn't fix what the first one did. The office was very quiet. She thought about Mara, 8 years old, a disease she didn't choose, a father trying to solve an unsolvable problem with whatever was in front of him. She thought about her mother Vera in the hospital and Warren taking a lien against everything he owned because he would not let the woman he loved feel the weight of the money. People do things for the people they love. That doesn't make the things right. It just makes the people human. I'm not going to say it's okay, she said, because it's not. Felix nodded. He didn't try to argue. But I'm not going to burn down what I have because of it either. She picked up the business card, stood up. I'm going to need you to write down everything that man asked you, every question, the date of the visit, everything you told him, in as much detail as you can. She put the card in her pocket. Can you do that? Yes. Good. She moved to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. The 5 tons I have to deliver in 6 weeks, the shells for that batch. I'm going to need them by Thursday. Felix said they'll be ready. She walked out. The dock was empty at this hour, just the highlights and the smell of brine and the sound of the water somewhere past the lot. She stood outside for a moment. Her hands were shaking very slightly. Not from fear, from the specific vibration of something that has been held still for too long, finally being allowed to move. Crestline had filed before she sold one bag. Roland's card was still on her kitchen table. He was waiting for her when she got home. Not at the door. At the end of the drive, his silver truck parked neatly, his figure standing beside it in the near dark, not intrusive, not aggressive, just present. Roland Ash in a good coat. Patient in the way of someone who has learned that timing matters more than pressure. She stopped her truck, got out. Mr. Ash. Ms. Vance. He looked at her face, registered something. I heard about the Callenbeck order. Congratulations. Thank you. I also heard about the county filing, the patent question. He said it gently. Everything Roland said had that quality. The gentleness of a man who has learned that you can make almost anything sound reasonable if you keep the edges soft enough. That kind of dispute takes resources to fight. Legal resources. Time. And you have a bank deadline. She looked at him. I'm not your enemy, Petra, he said. I want you to understand that. What do you want, Roland? He reached into his coat, drew out an envelope, held it out. She didn't take it. He set it on the hood of his truck instead. A revised offer, he said. Substantially revised. Consider it on your own time. There's no deadline on my end. He held her gaze for a moment. You've built something real here. I respect that. I'd like to be part of what it becomes. He got in his truck, drove away, neat, quiet, not pushy. She stood in the dark driveway alone. The envelope sat on her truck hood where he'd left it. White rectangle against silver metal. She left it there, went inside, sat at the kitchen table. The notebook was where she always kept it, next to the salt shaker. Roland's original card still on the corner of the table. She opened the notebook to the last entry she'd written. Her handwriting now, pages of it, observations, calculations, corrections. The notebook that had been Ellis's, then Warren's, now hers. The handwriting changing with each generation, like a river that changes color as it passes through different earth, but is still the same river. Biva appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea, set one in front of Petra, sat down. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Outside, the night was very still. The fields that had been pale and compacted in March were dark now and changed the soil, holding moisture differently, breathing differently. She knew this because she'd been paying attention. You have to pay attention to know when something is changing. Sometimes it takes a long time, and sometimes you're right in the middle of it before you see it. She picked up her tea. Tomorrow she would drive to see Lorna Hewitt about the 1971 publication. Tomorrow she would call Dr. Farley about the patent question. Tomorrow she would do all the things that needed to be done. Tonight she looked at the notebook. Tired ground isn't dead ground. She closed her eyes. Outside, somewhere along the east fence line, a nightbird was calling. Steady and low, the same phrase repeated the way all the things that know what they are repeat themselves without apology in the dark. She opened her eyes. She picked up her pen, kept writing. The envelope stayed on the truck hood overnight. Petra saw it from her bedroom window at 6 a.m., still there white against silver damp, now from the night air, slightly curled at one corner. She watched it for a moment. Then she went downstairs and made coffee and did not go out to get it. Beva sat across from her at the kitchen table with her own cup looking out at the gray light coming up over the east field. After a while, Beva said, "What does it say?" "I don't know. I didn't open it." Beva wrapped both hands around her cup. "But you know what it says." Petra looked at the window, at the truck, at the white rectangle still sitting there. "More money than last time," she said. "Same terms, different number." Beva nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" Petra thought about Lorna Hewitt in a 1971 publication she hadn't read yet, about Dr. Farley in a conversation she needed to finish, about a provisional patent filing that had come in before her first sale, and what that meant about who had known what and when. "I'm going to go see Edmund Farley," she said, "and then I'm going to decide." She finished her coffee, put on her boots, grabbed her jacket. The envelope was still on the truck hood. She picked it up on her way to the driver's side, held it for a second, feeling the weight of it through the paper. Then she put it in the glove box unopened, closed the glove box, and drove. Farley was in his garden when she pulled up. Not gardening exactly. Standing in it, looking at something near the ground, hands in his jacket pockets, the posture of a man thinking through a problem he's brought outside because the inside of the house wasn't giving him enough room. He looked up when she pulled in. Didn't seem surprised. She got out and walked over. "Monday isn't until next week," he said. "I know, I need to ask you something." He looked at her face. Something registered. He pulled his hands out of his pockets. "Come inside." At the kitchen counter, his yellow legal pad, her notebook. She told him what Lorna had found. The provisional patent filing, the timing, Crestline Agricultural Development, and a man named Wade Fenner, who had visited Felix Drummond at Harlow's Point 13 weeks ago and asked very specific questions about a very specific process. Farley listened, arms crossed, not interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you know who owns Crestline Agricultural Development?" She did know. She'd looked it up after Lorna's call. The name was publicly available if you knew where to look. "Roland Ash sits on the board," she said. "He's not listed as the owner, but he's been on the board for 9 years. Farley nodded, like that was a piece fitting into a shape he'd already seen. "In 2008, he said, there was a farm about 30 miles east of here, Grover Valley, good land, coastal positioning, significant acreage. The owner decided to try a soil restoration program using shell calcium amendment." He looked at his legal pad. "I was brought in as a consultant. The owner had money and resources and equipment. He'd done some reading. He had the right idea." Petra kept her face still. "What happened?" "He quit," Farley said. "Month 5. The soil wasn't showing visible results yet. He'd expected faster progress. He sold the eastern portion of the farm, moved away from the project entirely." Farley looked at her. "Recovery in severely depleted coastal soil takes 8 to 10 months for visible evidence. Month 5 is too early to see anything. You know that." She knew that. She'd lived that. She'd knelt in pale dead soil for months before anything came back. "The man who quit," she said. Farley said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. She looked at the legal pad, at the window, back at Farley. He didn't want to destroy what I was building, she said slowly, working through it as she said it the way you work through the logic of something you can see but haven't quite named yet. He wanted to buy it because he knew what it could be. He'd been 5 months from it himself, and he walked away and then watched from a distance while someone else crossed the finish line. She thought about that. This whole time she'd been thinking of Roland Ash as someone trying to take something from her. A predator. A man from a clean truck with a business card that meant power. And he was. He was all of that. But he was also a man who had stood in his own depleted field 16 years ago and tried this and not had enough faith in slow things to wait. And then watched as she waited, as she kept coming back. As the soil turned dark and the worms returned, and the thing he'd been one season short of became real under someone else's hands. That wasn't just greed, it was grief. The grief of recognizing in someone else the patience you couldn't find in yourself. She didn't say any of this out loud, but she understood it, and understanding it changed something small in her. Not toward forgiveness exactly, not toward softness, just toward clarity. "Thank you," she said. Farley picked up his pen. "Your legal situation." "Yes." The 1971 bulletin. He tapped his pad. "If Lorna Hewitt can get the original county record authenticated proof of date and authorship, then your grandfather's publication establishes prior art over anything Crestline filed. Their claim would be indefensible." He said it the way he said everything, flat and factual, but his eyes were not flat. "Their methodology is derivative. They built on your grandfather's published framework, without attribution. Can you testify to that?" A pause. "Yes," he said, one word, which from Edmund Farley was approximately the equivalent of a signed affidavit and a full court appearance and a willingness to drive 40 minutes to do something he hadn't planned. She gathered the notebook. "I'll call you when Lorna has the documents ready." She stood up. "Petra," Farley said. She stopped. "Your grandfather's paper was good work," he said. "For 1971, for any year." He went back to his legal pad. "Tell Ms. Hewitt to check the archive box reference 7-15C. That's where the county keeps the original bulletins, physical copies." He wrote it down, slid it across. "She'll need the original, not a photocopy for authentication." She took the paper. "Thank you, Dr. Farley." He didn't look up. She drove home through the early morning light, the fields on either side of Route 9 running past her windows, and she thought about Roland Ash standing in a depleted field 16 years ago. She thought about her grandfather writing in a notebook in 1967. She thought about the 5 months Roland didn't have, the 14 months the bank had given her. Patience is not a personality trait. It's a practice. You build it the same way you build anything. Slowly, imperfectly, one day at a time, and sometimes you don't do it well, and sometimes you lose it entirely, and sometimes you wake up in the night and don't know if you have any left. But you go back out the next morning anyway. That's all it is, going back out. Lorna Hewitt found it on a Thursday. Archive Box 714C, exactly where Farley had said. She called Petra at 4:47 in the afternoon. "I have it," she said. "The original bulletin, October 1971, Volume 12, Issue 4, County Agricultural Extension. And I have the submission records." Her voice had something in it that Petra had not heard there before, a kind of barely contained professional excitement. The sound of someone who has found exactly the thing they were looking for, in exactly the place they were told to look, and is trying to remain composed about it. "Petra, the methodology in the original filing is it's the same. The foundational framework is the same. The calcium to magnesium ratios, the application sequence, the organic residue processing. It's all there, in your grandfather's handwriting." Petra sat very still. "It predates Crestline Agricultural Development as a registered company by 11 years, Lorna said. 11 years. I'm going to contact the state agricultural office tomorrow," Lorna said. "I'll have the full prior art documentation ready by the end of the week. You'll need a lawyer to file the formal challenge, but with this..." She paused. The challenge is solid, Petra. It's solid. After she hung up, Petra sat at the kitchen table for a long moment. The notebook was in front of her. She opened it to the first page. Ellis Vance, 1967. The careful handwriting. The ink gone brown with age. He'd filed a paper 4 years after writing those first notes. Because he'd believed in it enough to write it down and share it. Because he was a fisherman who farmed, and he understood something about the relationship between the ocean and the land that nobody around him had thought to look at. And then he died in 1989. And the bulletin had gone into Box 714C in the county archive. And 35 years later, a man in a good coat with a silver truck had filed a provisional patent on the same idea. And before that, a girl's father had found his own father's notebook in a barn in the cold. And now, the letter from Crestline's lawyers arrived on a Monday. Thick envelope, heavy paper, a formal notice of environmental compliance review. Crestline Agricultural Development, acting in its capacity as a county-registered agricultural entity, was exercising its right to request a mandatory inspection of all processing operations at the Vance Farm property, with potential stop work implications pending review. Not illegal, not even unusual, just perfectly timed. The kind of move that is not a punch, but a grip, slowing her down, forcing her attention elsewhere. Burning days she didn't have. Petra read it twice, then she called Lorna. Lorna was quiet for 3 seconds. Then they know I found the bulletin. Yes. They're trying to freeze your operation before the prior art filing goes through. Yes. How long until the Callenbeck delivery? 4 weeks. Another pause. Lorna was doing the same math Petra was doing. The inspection process, the timeline, the window between Crestline's move and the prior art filing. Whether 4 weeks was enough room. I'm going to move the filing up, Lorna said. I'll call the state office tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. A beat. I'm also going to make a different call. There's a woman at the State Agricultural Board. We went through the county certification program together 12 years ago. She owes me lunch and more. Lorna's voice was flat and professional, and underneath it was something that sounded like controlled anger. The kind that comes from watching a system used against the exact person it was supposed to protect. Give me 48 hours. 48 hours. Okay, Petra said. She hung up, sat at the table, went back to work. 2 days later, Lorna called back. The prior art filing had been submitted. The State Agricultural Board had opened a review. Crestline's environmental inspection request had been, in the language of bureaucracy, placed in pending status, pending resolution of the active intellectual property dispute, which meant it wasn't going anywhere. Not right now. Crestline's provisional patent claim would take months to formally collapse. But the inspection, the immediate threat, was paused, and the 5-ton delivery to Callenbeck would go out on time, because they would work until it did. The Callenbeck delivery was on a Tuesday. Ned drove the truck. Petra rode with him. Darlene handled the paperwork from the farm end. 2 hours north, a 30-acre organic operation with a main field that had been struggling with exactly the kind of acid soil depletion that Petra had been treating in her own test plot. The operations manager walked the delivery in personally. A lean man named Garrett who said almost nothing and looked at everything. He opened one of the bags, took a handful of the amendment and rubbed it between his palms, held it to the light, looked at Petra. This is good product, he said. High praise from a man like Garrett was apparently a single declarative sentence. Thank you, Petra said. She drove home in the passenger seat with the window down and the afternoon air coming in, and she thought, this is what it feels like. When something actually works. Not when you believe it might, not when you're hoping it will, but when someone who knows their field takes your product in his hands and says those 4 words. This is good product. She didn't say anything to Ned the whole drive home. He didn't seem to mind. Roland Ash's envelope was still in the glove box. She'd left it there for 3 weeks. The night after the Callenbeck delivery, she took it out, at the kitchen table, opened it. It was 47 pages, which was 47 pages. She'd expected a letter, a number, maybe a summary. She made fresh coffee, sat down, started reading. The offer itself was real, a number that had more digits in it than she had ever seen in a document addressed to her personally, a number that could pay the bank debt 14 times over. She read the main offer section, read it again. Then she turned to the supporting clauses. Clause 11.3 was on page 19. Notwithstanding any representation made in the primary offer terms, the acquiring entity reserves the right to substitute or supplement up to 45% of natural or organic source material in the licensed product formulation with synthetically derived or industrially produced mineral compounds, provided that such substitution does not alter the product's primary listed ingredients as presented on consumer-facing packaging. She stopped, read it again. 45% synthetic compounds, not altering the packaging, not altering what the bag said on the outside, just quietly replacing what was on the inside. She kept reading. Clause 14.7 was on page 23. She was to serve as brand ambassador for a period of not less than 36 months. The product would carry her name, her image, her story. She would not hold decision-making authority over formulation sourcing or production processes. Her face, her name, her grandfather's work, on a bag of something that would not be her grandfather's work. She turned pages. Clause 19.2 was on page 31. All current operational personnel agreements shall be reviewed and restructured within 12 months of acquisition date, with no guarantee of continued employment under new management structure. Ned, Darlene. She set the pages down. She looked at the kitchen, the yellow curtains, the chipped mug, the scratch on the linoleum from the deer Warren had dragged in. Same as always, everything the same as always, except her. She was not the same as she'd been the morning she sat here with a cold cup of coffee and a cold piece of news from a lawyer's office and 14 months on a clock. She was not the same at all. She called Dr. Farley in the morning. "I have a question," she said. "What?" "If someone offered you a significant amount of money to put your name on research you no longer had control over, would you do it?" A short silence. "No," Farley said. "Why not?" "Because my name is the only thing I have that is entirely mine. Once you put it on something, you can't take it back." A pause. "Is this about the Crestline offer?" "Yes." "Then my answer is still no. What did the clause say exactly?" She read clause 11.3 to him over the phone. A long silence. 45% synthetic substitution, he said. "Yes. Your grandfather's paper established this methodology specifically because natural calcium carbonate releases in a time-controlled way that synthetic compounds cannot replicate. The soil biology responds to the rate of mineral release. Change the source material, you change the release rate. You change the release rate in the product. Doesn't work the same way. Doesn't work the same way." Petra looked at the 47 pages on the kitchen table. "The bag would still say the same thing on the front," she said. "Yes," said Farley. "It would." She folded the offer in thirds, put it back in the envelope. "Thank you, Edmund." She wrote the refusal by hand, one sentence. She kept it simple because what she needed to say was simple. She wasn't angry at Roland Ash. She understood what had driven him here, the grief of almost having it, the damage of being one season short of patience. She understood it the way you understand something you nearly did yourself in your worst moments, in the nights you held the business card and thought about what a different kind of person might have done. But understanding wasn't accepting. And the work that had started in Ellis Vance's notebook in 1967 was not going to end in clause 11.3. She sealed the envelope, mailed it the same day. The cooperative took 3 weeks to build. Not a dramatic 3 weeks. A quiet, specific, one conversation at a time 3 weeks that felt more like setting fence posts than raising a banner. You go to one person, you have the conversation, you give them time to think, then you go to the next. Bart Welby was first. She knocked on his door on a Saturday morning. He opened it, took one look at her and said, "Come in." She sat at his kitchen table. He made coffee without asking if she wanted any, which she took as a sign that he'd been expecting this conversation in some form for some time. She explained the structure: a cooperative model, shared equity, the fishermen who supplied the shells, the farmers who used the product, the workers who built it. Decision-making distributed, profits shared. Bart listened. He said nothing for about a minute after she finished, which was Bart's way of indicating that he was taking something seriously. "What percentage?" he said. She told him. He looked at his coffee cup. "Warren would have done it this way," he said. "He never liked owning things other people needed to depend on." "I know." "All right." He looked up. "What do I sign?" Priscilla Ward said yes before Petra finished explaining the structure. Literally before. She was 3 sentences in when Priscilla held up one hand. "Petra, yes." "I haven't finished." "Yes." "Where do I sign? What do I bring? When does this start?" She set down her teacup. "I have been waiting for someone in this county to do something like this for 30 years. Your grandfather would have done it. Your father was thinking about it. You're doing it." She picked the teacup back up. "Is the coffee still warm?" Ned said yes in approximately 4 words. "You're keeping my job. You'd own part of the company." Then yes. Darlene asked 27 questions in rapid succession, which was her way of doing due diligence, and then said yes. 4 fishermen from Harlow's Point came as a group on a Thursday evening, sat around Petra's kitchen table. She walked them through the numbers: what the cooperative would mean for their shell waste disposal costs, what equity they'd hold, how decisions would be made. They asked good questions, practical questions, the questions of people who worked the water and understood how things that seemed like waste could be something else depending on who was paying attention. They signed. 3 farms that had been buying products said yes. 12 people total. 14 months after she'd stood in the cold with a mallet and a theory and zero confidence that any of it was going to work. 12 people. And one more. She drove to Harlow's Point on a Tuesday evening. Felix's office, same small desk, same whiteboard, same coffee maker from 2003. She sat across from him. She put the cooperative documents on the desk between them, and beside them a separate smaller document: the shell supply contract, a formal agreement, a guaranteed rate per ton, a schedule, the kind of contract that means something to a business and to a man who has been calculating how to cover a surgical procedure. Felix looked at the documents, did not touch them. "Why?" he said. "Not what is this, not how much, just why." "Because you were the first person I asked for help," Petra said. "And you helped me, and you made a mistake." And she thought about how to say the next part, because it was the real part. The part that mattered underneath the legal language and the percentage points in the supply contract. "Because a long time ago, my father spent 2 days fixing a man's hay baler without charging for it. And that man kept the debt in his pocket for 12 years and paid it back with a bag of compost and some old papers." She looked at Felix. "People make mistakes. That doesn't mean they stop being people." Felix was very still. "Mara," he said, "the supply contract starts paying out quarterly. The first distribution would be March." His jaw worked. He looked at the documents for a long time. Then he picked up the pen she'd brought. He signed. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. There was nothing that needed saying that hadn't already been said in the room. She picked up the documents, stood up. She was at the door when he said Petra. She turned. I was looking at the desk, not at her. His voice was rough in a way it hadn't been before, the professional composure stretched thin over something real underneath. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once, walked out. The coda on Roland Ash came not from a letter, not from a confrontation, not from a public moment of any kind. It came from Lorna Hewitt on the phone 3 weeks after the cooperative was officially registered. "Crestline Agricultural Development is closing its Grover County regional office," Lorna said. "They announced a regional restructuring, pulling resources back to their main operations." A pause. "Their patent application has been formally challenged. The outcome is, the prior art record is solid, Petra. It's solid. Petra was standing in the east field when Lorna called. She'd come out to check the northern section, which she was prepping for the next planting round. The soil there was halfway through its amendment cycle, still working, still changing. Okay, she said. That's it. Okay, what else is there to say? A pause. I suppose nothing, Lorna said. She sounded like she might have wanted something more. And fair enough. All of that late-night work deserves something. Lorna, Petra said. Yes? Thank you for all of it. I don't think I said that clearly enough at any point. A brief silence. You did what you needed to do, Lorna said. I just... She stopped. Started again. I've seen a lot of farms in this county go under, and I've watched a lot of people accept reasons they shouldn't have had to accept. Another pause. This one went differently. I was glad to be part of why. After she hung up, Petra stood in the field for a moment. Roland Ash was gone. Not destroyed, not publicly shamed, just gone. Retreating to whatever comes after a plan that ran out of patience on someone who didn't. She thought about him standing in his own depleted field in 2008. Month 5, the soil still pale, the results not showing yet. She thought about the morning she'd stood in the mud after the rain had taken her pile. Tractor dead. Felix's information already sold. The business card on the table. The decision she'd almost made. The almost didn't matter. The staying did. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired and relieved, and something that took her a moment to name. Something like gratitude, not toward anyone in particular, just toward the general fact of still being here, still standing on this field. The soil dark beneath her boots, alive in the way it had not been alive when she arrived. She turned over a handful of dirt. Dark, teeming, real. She let it go. There is a specific quality to early morning in late October in Grover County. The light comes up slowly, pink first, then gold, then the full pale brightness of a clear fall morning, the kind that has no warmth in it, yet but promises warmth, the way certain people promise things quietly without fanfare and then actually deliver. Petra was in the field before the gold. She'd been doing this since March. Early mornings, the field, the cold. She'd done it alone in the beginning the way she'd done everything in the beginning. Now, well, Aunt Beba was at the back door, which she did sometimes just to stand there. She was holding 2 cups of coffee. She didn't bring them out. She just held them one in each hand, watching her niece move through the field in the early light, like she was watching something she wanted to remember the exact shape of. Ned arrived at 7. He came around the side of the barn and started on the processing setup without being told because he knew what needed to happen and didn't require instruction anymore. Hadn't required it in months. Darlene was already on the phone with the Callenbeck distribution contact. A different call than the first one. This one routine, the kind of call you make when you have a standing arrangement and you're confirming a schedule. Priscilla Ward had stopped by the day before with an article she'd cut from the county agricultural newsletter. A small feature, not front page, a quarter-page piece about a young woman on Route 9 who had built a soil cooperative from shell waste in 3 generations of research. The article mentioned Ellis Vance. It mentioned Warren Vance. It mentioned Petra. In that order. Priscilla had circled Ellis's name in red pen and written in the margin, "Finally." It took long enough. The fence line along the east field was where she found Dr. Farley. She'd looked up from what she was doing, and there he was, standing at the fence, not saying anything, just there. He'd driven 40 minutes apparently without being asked, without calling. He was wearing his work jacket, hands in his pockets, watching the field with the expression of a scientist observing a result he had helped to produce and is now seeing in its final form. She walked over. They stood together at the fence for a moment. The field ran out in front of them. All of it, the full 18 acres, worked and changed and alive in a way that it had not been the morning she'd driven home from Harlow's Point with a truck bed full of shells and a theory and no plan beyond the next Thursday. The north section, she said, I'm starting the next treatment cycle next week. The ratios are stable now, Farley said. You shouldn't need to adjust. I know. You have good records. I learned from someone who kept good records. A small pause. Farley looked at the field. Your grandfather would have been pleased, he said. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The sun had cleared the tree line now. The full morning light across the field, the soil catching it, the dew still on the grass at the edges, steaming off in slow, invisible threads. Somewhere along the south fence line, the barn swallows were arguing again. The woodpecker was at its work, steady and precise, the same rhythm it always had. Farley was quiet for another moment, and then soft almost to himself in the voice of a man who is not performing a thing, but simply saying what is true. Tired ground isn't dead ground, he said. It's just ground that hasn't met the right hands yet. The morning came all the way up. The field held the light the way good soil holds water completely, the way something holds on to what it finally found. Petra looked at it. Then she went back to work. That evening, after Beva had gone to bed, she sat alone at the kitchen table with the notebook and the lamp and a cup of coffee that was still hot. She opened it. The first page, Ellis Vance, 1967. She turned to Warren's section, then past it, past the letter, to the pages she'd been filling since March. Her own handwriting, month by month, all of it. She turned past all of it, to the blank pages still remaining. There were more blank pages than filled ones, which was right, which was how it should be. She opened to the first blank page. She did not write a date. What she wrote instead was a heading. Simple. What I know now. Then below it she started writing. Not research notes, not ratios, something else. What she knew about soil, what she knew about waiting, what she knew about the specific courage required to keep doing a thing when every visible indicator says the thing is not working, and the only evidence you have that it might still work is a single sentence written by a man you barely remember in a notebook you almost didn't open. She wrote for a long time. When she stopped, she looked at the page. At her own handwriting, strange and familiar at the same time, she thought about Ellis, about Warren, about a Tuesday morning in late March and a kitchen floor and coffee still warm. She thought about 14 months, mallet handles and cracked knuckles, and the smell that had driven her neighbor to the county phone. A woman with steel gray hair and a teacup. A man with a legal pad and the highest praise consisting of 4 words. 2 people who'd needed work and found it and learned it and became essential. A man who'd made a mistake and been given a chance to start again from where he stood. About tired ground, not dead ground. She closed the notebook, set it next to the salt shaker where it lived. She turned off the kitchen light. Outside, the east field ran all the way to the fence line under a clear October sky. The soil resting now in the way, soil rests after a season of work, not empty but full. Not finished but ready. Patient in the way that all good ground is patient, holding everything it has been given, waiting for whatever comes next. It had met the right hands. That was all. That was enough.